there's still some people trailing in, but I think now is a really good time to start. So I just want to welcome everybody. I'm going to be also watching the waiting room. So if I'm doing that also, just know that's what I'm doing. Yeah, it feels really wonderful to gather in this way and to be here with Ryan and Clara and Shannon and to have everyone who's here. I'm just glad that you made it. We're going to be diving into a topic that feels very timely, very relevant to all of us. And before we really get into anything, what I'd really love to offer is just a few moments for us all to ground, to get into our bodies, and to just feel our own musculature. This is it's a charged topic. It's a charged topic. And what I really want to invite in is like all of you is welcome here, right? Your opinions, your feelings, it's all welcome. And I also invite an invitation to be responsible for what arises within you, to tend to that, to take care of yourself. Let yourself be as you are and also take care of yourself. And we'll outline some perimeters of the talk, which I think will help us settle and ground even more. But as we start, let's just all take a really deep breath. Oh, yeah. And just notice, do I want to keep my eyes open? Do I want to close my eyes? What helps me feel more connected to myself? And bring your awareness to your hands. Let's just like all squeeze our hands here. Feel a sense of the body and space. And then let your attention go down into your seat when you're ready. Can you feel your connection to the ground, your connection to the floor, to your feet? And I'm going to invite all of us as we start to bring more attention to the body to just set an intention for your time here. Like, why are you here? What brought you? What are you hoping to get out of this? And in your own way, in a way that aligns with your own practice, your own experience, can you call in with all of us this greater field, right? This greater field of love, this greater field of support, this greater field of life. And in your own way, if you do feel that come through, just notice how it comes through in your body. Does your belly soften? Do your eyes soften? Oh. And then being in that, entering that field together, I'm going to turn on a song for 2 minutes, and let's just move in a really natural, organic way before we dive in.
There in the deep unknown, there in the dark, lifeline, and it becomes a spark.
Whatever you're coming to the call with, can you let yourself feel it and also let yourself move as you feel? So whatever is arising and alive, it has some kind of pathway to move. Breathe it through, move it through your body. And when you're ready, just come back to the screen. Welcome. I'm gonna hand it over to you, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for that juicy intro. I thought that I was grounded, but then we had that second chance, and sometimes there's a little bit more to be done. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're really excited to have you to talk about this very important topic of free birth and some questions and thoughts that are emerging for the four of us and you all after this recent article about the Free Birth Society that was published in The Guardian. I think first we should all just introduce ourselves. So I'll go first, and then Blair, you want to go after me? Um, I am a doctor of physical therapy, and I do pelvic care, holistic pelvic care. I've been working in this field for 20 years, but have been working with women in pelvic care for 14 after the very significant experience of the birth of my first child, Poppy. I have two. Cass is my second. And I was fortunate enough to have two really uneventful births that were beautiful and wonderful. My postpartum period, however, was really difficult. I feel like no woman leaves this experience without going into the dark. And I did, and I've come out on the other side. But I'm very passionate about body sovereignty, about pelvic reclamation, about women really owning their bodies and having a choice to especially give birth in the way that they want to. Um, but I also believe in medical ethics, being a doctor. I believe in also safety and security of mamas and babies. And so I'm trying to hold both of those things together. And that's why this topic is really important to me. Blair, I'll give it to you from there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clara Wisner. I am a bioenergetic nutritionist, and I have worked with women pretty much exclusively in the field of kind of fertility, women's health, and hormones for 12 years. And I'm also a mama to two girls. And similarly to Ryan, actually, the births themselves were quite empowering and beautiful. And if there was a way that I wanted it to go, they went the way I wanted it to go. And postpartum, especially with my second, I had two babies in 2 years, unplanned on the conscious level. That was a really deep crash into, it was like a rapid descent into motherhood, and also my body changing so much and my health changing a lot. And so I've, yeah, really, even though I was interested in nutrition and working with women on fertility and nourishment, my work has deepened so much. My life has deepened so much by the process of birth and motherhood. Um, and yeah, I deeply believe in each individual's sovereignty and their ability to know what's best for them. And I also really want to, in my work and in my just beingness, I want to invite women into what I call feminine power, which is a power that arises from the inside, from a gnosis, if you will. And so, yeah, I'm really interested in this topic, um, because yeah, there's a lot of questions around that idea, like how do we invite in feminine power and be responsible at the same time. So thank you.
Shannon, you want to go? And then Blair, you can.
Oh, okay, yeah. My
Okay.
name's Shannon Stallo. I live in Berkeley, California. I am a midwife. I've been doing births for over 20 years. Home births is what I do. I also had my 3 children at home. And I've been talking about free birth in the office for probably 5 years now. Women have come in and, of course, they want a midwife's opinion on free birth. And I didn't actually know much about the movement itself, particular to FBS, but it's an interesting topic. And I think there's a lot to dig into. And I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Go ahead, Blair.
Yeah, so for those who are here who don't know me, I'm Blair. I am a somatic educator, an erotic educator. My work really, really lies at the intersection of the body and the psyche. So, soul and soma, um, and how these things relate, like embodiment not just being a physical process, but it actually being a psychological process and a maturation, where body and mind work together. And I have a 4-year-old son, and his birth was just a complete descent process for me. It was very long, it was very hard. I had a team with me at home, um, a midwife, 2 doulas, and I felt very grateful for their support um, in that process. And here, I think, yeah, I'm just very interested to discuss today themes around personal responsibility and believing that responsibility is a core part of maturing as a woman, and also I think, as Ryan was saying, like holding attention somehow of like where when we're not ready for certain things, when the embodiment of certain concepts or ideologies just we're just not ready for it, psychologically. Um, and then who is responsible? And it's really just this question that I want to lean into today and discuss. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks, ladies. So I'm going to give you all just a little outline of like we basically came together to discuss kind of our mission for this discussion and what we really want to cover and talk about. So I just want you guys to be with us in that. And this was a collaborative effort among the 4 of us. And of course, we want to know if there is anything that you want to discuss too, and we'll get to that towards the end of our talk. Okay, so hang in there. We are interested in what you have to say and your experience, and we want you to share that with us. So obviously we were brought to this because of this article, but none of us, were new to this idea of free birth, being sovereign women ourselves and having children, all of us wondering, hey, can we do that ourselves? And likely never having experienced birth in our homes, probably most of us hadn't witnessed a birth before we gave birth ourselves. So really understanding the loss of ancestral wisdom around birthing out in the open, birthing with community. So holding that question of like, how can we do this on our own? But the article certainly brought up for me, and Blair was the first to come to me with like, wow. And the fact that I had followed Free Birth Society for quite some time and was enraptured by specifically Yolande, who is a wordsmith and extremely intelligent. I'm just like Kelly Brogan vibes too. Like I'm just like so attracted to these women who are so intelligent and can speak so clearly online. So I had been watching them for quite some time. But then things got there was a point in time where my like inner alarm bells started going off, not like big alarm bells, just kind of like I might like distance myself a little bit from this because it's starting to feel like pretty radical. And of course, during COVID times, all things, got radical. And I just was like, it's too much. I can't. Um, and so I removed myself a little bit from that. But this article, but I did see that Emily lost her baby. So that was another thing last year that really like hit me hard. And it was sadness. It was mourning. I was like, wow, that must be so difficult for her to be in the public eye, to be, you know, doing Free Birth Society and then to lose her own child as a stillbirth at 41 weeks or something like that. I mean, just like, wow, I just wouldn't want to be in that position. And so I just felt really bad for her. But then this article came and I was like, okay, people have been watching this and now it's like a bigger deal. Like I was like, oh, there's things going on that might feel like negligence or like like something where suddenly it feels like the law is getting involved or like it's a bigger thing. And I was like, this is wow, but the whole time it's wow for me. It's not judgment. And I want it to be very clear. And Blair and I discussed this when we were first putting this out. We did not want at all for this to be about call out culture, cancel culture, like pointing fingers. Like it's just not who we are. And maybe other people are doing that and you guys feel that that's valid, that may be, but it's not what this conversation is about. And so we just want to be really clear that that's not why we're here. Okay. Um, we are really interested in learning through the process of discussion and inviting community to discuss difficult topics that might be really scary, or you might feel like I never really felt good about saying these things out loud about Free Birth Society because I was scared or nervous that my opinions might be judged or they might be outrageous or whatever. And in the time of social media, which is something else we want to discuss, like there are guru complexes and are we in that and like is this social media influencer stuff dangerous for us, and we want to know like how do we discern who's really knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. We also want to respect the process of birth and ask the questions. And it's one of the reasons why Wonderful Shannon is here is like we want to ask the questions like what are birth ethics? What do birthing assistants or people who attend births regularly, what do they learn in terms of birth ethics? And are we really meant to birth alone? Have we ever birthed alone? Is that a thing? Like we are curious about that. And then we want to know how, and Blair spoke to this, like, how do you know inside yourself when you're making a good choice? And what is that embodiment and attunement and discernment? When does that really land? And is it possible to land having your first baby? Are you an embodied birthing woman during your first birth? Maybe you are. But are we or are not? And are we not? And I think it's a good thing for us to at least talk about so that young women who are having their first babies, they ask themselves those questions and then they seek out help or embodiment attunement practices so that they can be more aligned when they're in this process. And um, so that's where we're at. So I think we're just going to kind of start to open this discussion up between the four of us. And if you have things that you guys want to talk about, please put them in the chat. Um, I think one of the first things that we should go for here is like we recognize that and Shannon said this, I'm going to quote her, we have a spiritually impoverished birth system. So we are seeking out something different, aren't we? It's hyper-medicalized, it's harmful, and we're looking for something else. And so I think that gave rise to Free Birth Society. And we wonder, you know, how does that lead to the Free Birth Society experience and what could we do differently? And Shannon, I just am curious about your experience as a midwife and your thoughts about free birth and this kind of evolution that you've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think you stated all of that really well. And I think the modern maternity care system is pretty uh, high tech, low touch. And in America, there's a very big break in the chain of knowledge when it comes to birth. So, like in the late 1800s, the American Medical Association came and pretty much got rid of midwives through smear campaigns and propaganda, mostly in white communities and in African American communities in the South. The midwives actually hung on longer for a variety of social reasons. And so I think what you see is what you alluded to is that women nowadays just enter birth in a very strange state where they've never heard a woman go through a contraction. Like just seeing a mom go through a contraction and how she moves and the noises she makes is a form of knowledge. And we don't enter birth with that type of knowledge. And I think you're just seeing the results of that. And women are correcting for that break in our own knowledge and reclaiming it. And I think the Free Birth Society tapped into that. And it was very attractive to women. They talked about it a lot in my practice. What did I think of it? And I think, I had three babies at home with midwives. I think that, and I always try to look at my life, how I eat, how I raise my children, my own spirituality through like a tradition. Like, what did people what did people do back in the old days? Obviously, there were faults and we've improved on things, but I think we sometimes try to look ahead too much. We don't look back enough. And I think women have always had people with them in birth. I just don't think that even the physiology of birthing, I just don't think women birth well alone. It's very stressful to hold the birth in your head. I think it is. I think it's like you're meant to shut that part of your brain off and get into a state and a trance of just being in the moment. And it's a rare woman who could do that. And there are women who do it. And we have all of their podcasts of these beautiful free birth stories. But again, I think that like I feel like I've gained a knowledge that women have always had by studying. I've been to 800 births, so sitting at the feet of women, I've learned a lot about a female body, about how humans come into the world, about babies, about motherhood and breastfeeding. And I think that women have always had those women in their communities who are specialized in that knowledge and who could keep mothers and babies safe. That's a really important thing for societies, right? That mothers and babies are safe, supported, thriving. Just like if I needed a bowl or a cup, I would have to go to a potter. Like, I don't know how to do pottery, but there's probably a woman who's like an expert in that, and she knows how to use clay and she knows how to fire the kiln to the right temperature. Like, those are very specific crafts that women have always known. So I don't think that midwives are all the same. I think that midwives are very different. And even in my own community of midwives, there are midwives who I think are more medical than others. When I delivered my babies, I had Judy Luce, who wrote the first home birth article in Our Bodies Ourselves. She was my midwife. So she's been doing this a long time. She's in her 80s now. And she told me, look, I'm just a mother dressed up as a midwife. And I thought that was like a really beautiful approach to midwifery. And so I think that's kind of the approach I get. But I do think because of what I mentioned before, that there is this break in our understanding of birth in this country in particular, that midwives approach it from a medical perspective sometimes, just because it's acknowledged, it has a certain, like it makes them maybe have a standing or status that they feel is different than just like I literally most of the time I don't use the skills and knowledge. I mean, the knowledge maybe, but the skills that I need for emergencies, I often, vast majority of the time, I don't use them. So it's not like the most glamorous job in that way. Like it looks like I'm doing nothing, but it is a process in that prenatal care, and we've gotten to this point of like building this trust in birth, so that often I don't have to do anything at a birth, but I mean, I just had a birth last week where she needed to be sutured. She was bleeding pretty heavily from her sutures and she needed it. And I always think about how does that work in a free birth? And I mean, I'm sure it works, but I do think that midwives have a role and a special role. And yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I love having you here just to like speak from that perspective of birth keeper. You know, you've been sitting at the bedside and it's not like, can we just have a woman on call hanging out? You know, they don't have to really do anything maybe, but could they be there just in case? And could they know how to shift our position if our baby has shoulder, you know, if we're in a shoulder dystocia situation, which is what that free birth article opened up with.
Yeah,
um, and was such a tragic story, you know.
totally. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
those are the first, like I'm a first responder at birth. Like I have those skills if needed. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I just have something for Blair right now that I'm thinking of because I reread the article this morning and I was thinking about the there were three Free Birth Society women at this birth that was the first birth that they mentioned. And they were in a cohort together, and this woman who was giving birth was sure, like she could feel inside herself that something was going wrong, but the nervous system overriding was happening among all of them. It was happening among the two women that were with her, even though the baby was like the head was out, the body wasn't coming out, the baby was blue, there were bubbles, you know, like the things that midwives would see as definite signs of distress. And I don't know, what struck me was just like the overriding, all of them together, and almost
Yeah.
the fear of speaking up, you know?
Yeah. 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 If I can jump in, when I received the majority of messages that I received from women, and thank you so much to the women who sent them in, there was a distinct theme in all of them, which was like some variation of I I was afraid to do it wrong. I was afraid to do it wrong and to have people judge me. And maybe not, maybe judgment wasn't always the word, but afraid to do it wrong and be seen a certain way in the eyes of this group. And I found that really interesting because it does speak to this part of the nervous system that wants to be a part of something, like that wants to fit in. And I think when we have a cause that feels righteous and noble to us, um, and then we find a community that helps us, yeah, feel like we know who we are, feel like we're grounded in our values. That groupthink can actually be really antithetical to like this sovereignty that we're talking about, like this like animalistic impulse of like, oh, there's a baby and I should help them. Um, for me, that fear was like very, very interesting. A lot of women talking about having to digest experiences of like having done it wrong. And you know, I think about the Freebirth Society, I think about the leaders, And obviously, it's not, you can, I think I can infer, I can assume that their intention is not bad, right? I feel like I can assume that. And I think that when we get into these group situations, there's this shadow of the group, right? There's the unconscious forces of the group that they might not even be aware of, that we might not be aware of, because obviously it's shadow. And it just seems so obvious that part of the shadow material that's arising within this group is around like doing it right, getting it right, having the right birth that is empowered. Um, and I just find that, I can first of all really relate because I've been in group situations like that where I've really felt that unconscious pressure to want to do the right thing, and fit in, even if I didn't know it at the time. And yeah, I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think we're also trying to do right by our babies, aren't we? And like trying to avoid getting into the medical trap of that we've
Yeah,
all heard over and over again of the like induction and then the emergency and then the C-section. It's like we know that that's like the obvious cascade, you know? And so we're all just like desperately trying to like labor at home as long as possible, even if our water breaks and bacteria is going to enter the uterus, or, you know, like all of those, all of the lore is like stuff we're trying to like dodge, you know, and weave.
yeah,
Um,
and for good
and it
reason, right? For good
totally,
reason. Like we want what is best for our babies. And what's also interesting to me is just the extreme nature. Like, so we have one extreme of birth in the medical system, and then the option that seems to have manifested is just a total other extreme. And in the article, they use this word obstetrical violence. Like any kind of intervention is obstetrical violence, which I found very like my body really responded to that. Like, wow, that's a very charged way of looking at it. But couldn't it also be true that it is violence to not resuscitate a baby? Couldn't it also be true that it's violence, that there's a level of, um, I don't know, would you call it violence? Would you call it something else? But there's something there too that's like, Jung talks about this concept, and I meant to look up the word and I didn't. It's like andromedia or something. It's like when you fight against something so hard, what happens in the psyche is you start to emulate the thing that you are fighting. You start to take on characteristics and have this righteousness of like, well, it's I'm right. But what you're doing is actually becoming the thing that you fight against. And I saw what I perceived in that was, this question of like, is this pendulum swing actually becoming the harm that we fear for our babies?
Hmm. It's definitely the other side of the coin, right? Like in the medical system, you're nothing. You're just like a cog in the machine of birth. Not every birth, but that's the extreme. And then with the free birth, you're everything. You are doing it all. Like you go from doing nothing and just having these things done to you, which I think is what they label obstetrical violence.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of the coin, you have nothing done to you. You're alone and you're going to do it on your own. And I think that is such a hyper individualized, like our society. I think people really need community and they're looking for it. And I always just found it so interesting that this movement was just this really hyper individualized, like this, like the woman could do it all, which is, I mean, she can birth her baby on her own, but she can't like do the postpartum. I mean, she needs support. And so yeah, I think in both cases she ends up pretty isolated and alone.
Yeah, I'm something about my own births has been coming up here. And I think I heard about free birth after I'd given birth to my oldest, I think. So it would have been about 5 years ago. And I remember initially feeling like, why? Like, why would you want to do it alone? Like, this similar to what Shannon was saying about like, this feels like women's work, you know? Um, and I don't like hospitals. I feel very unsafe in hospitals. And so I was obviously never going to do a birth in a hospital either. But then after my second birth, which was all in all really beautiful and empowering, like I said, but I did have a traditional midwife at a home birth who I, I gave birth, and it was kind of like an off and on, like it was a slow, the birth itself, like the intensive part of birth was short, but I had, my water broke like 24 hours before anything really even started happening. So there was this like long waiting period. Um, and I think it had made the midwife a little nervous. This is my interpretation. Um, and, you know, she had tried to do like a membrane sweep and I said no. And so there was like these ways that there was a little bit of like tension. And then when I had Maya and got her on me, there was blood and she gave me a shot in the thigh of Pitocin, I think, to stop the bleeding. Afterwards, she told me this. And it's just like a little thing. It's like this little thing where I was like, I'm not sure I would have chosen that. And I want to trust her for her expertise. But because of that, and because of a few other things that happened during that birth, you know, having a third baby, it has occurred to me to potentially have a free birth. Or like an unassisted birth, if you will, partially because I've had two births that were basically, there wasn't a, you know, they were uncomplicated. So I'm just sitting with all of these things that we've shared and thinking about my personal, like this is a conclusion, and I'm not saying that I will do a free birth. I'm just saying it was actually the kind of feeling that there was someone else in the birthing container that was maybe not fully aligned with me. And bringing this back, I'm thinking about, you know, kind of bringing it back to this idea of embodiment and sovereignty and mature feminine, and like the long line of mothers and birthing women, right? And how we want to be connected to part of to that. Like I think we all want to be connected to that. I feel like that's part of free birth's message in some ways, is like women have been doing this forever, you know, and you can do it. If you take it like the less extreme, like you have to do it alone. And yeah, so like it's like there's this fear that can come in the room. And that's how it felt in my second birth. Like there was this fear that was there that wasn't mine. And I was like, I don't want to invite that in again. I would love to have an experience where that wasn't there. And if I could find a woman that would be able to hold that, but also has the expert, you know, like, so there's this like the lack of trust and embodiment in the feminine collective. It breeds something like this. Like I can see it in my own process, you know, and yeah, so I'm sitting with that and sitting with my because my impulse with this article is to say that it's a witch hunt, and to say that they have a motive, like a very clear motive to make these women look dangerous and evil. And of course, I do not want babies to die, and I do not want mothers to have babies that have died. Like I don't want any of that. I don't think that that's necessary. So anyway, that's what's come up for me with just reading the chat too. I think I was partly responding to some stuff in the chat.
Well, I think that actually brings up the question that we had about like what you had, Claire. Was like, who's responsible?
Yeah.
Who's responsible? Birth is inherently risky. It's inherently risky. I feel like that almost should be like the first thing that we learn is it's inherently risky. I
Yeah.
think we know that deep down, but I think a lot of women just think somebody will save me, something will save me, something will save my baby. No matter what, there's going to be some intervention that's going to save my baby. And we all know that even if you're in the hospital giving a birth, sometimes you can lose a baby.
Mm.
But we obviously we this is another piece of like we don't see birth, we don't see death. We don't see either one of them.
Mhm.
So we're not very good at, understanding the birth process. We're not really good at understanding the grief process. I've seen this, I forget this guy's name on Instagram. He's like the male OB guy and it's like everywhere, Nathaniel,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, but he's talking about like do all babies survive? No. Um, and I'm like, yeah, okay. But like in this case of the shoulder dystocia thing, it's like so obvious and so something that you can do by just like moving the iliums this way or moving the iliums that way or rolling back on your back or getting on all fours or getting in a lunge. Like, come on, those are like basic postural adjustments to make of the pelvis so that your baby can come out. So I think, yeah, we got to like ride that kind of like, and also I got a shot with Pitocin as well after I gave birth to Poppy, but my understanding was that my placenta had detached and when they pushed on my belly that like floods of blood came out and that I could have bled out. Like I don't actually know if that's even true. Is that true or not? I have no idea, but I've sort of always, it's interesting you questioned it because I was like, oh shit, I didn't even question that. I just was like, oh, I needed that. I know I lost a lot of blood. I did not have an easy time breastfeeding after postpartum those first couple of weeks, so I must have lost a lot of blood in that time. And so but it's like I don't know. Was I going to die or was that shot of Pitocin unnecessary? Shannon, do you want to tell us?
I mean,
Is
I
it
carry.
necessary or not?
I
I
mean,
want to know now.
sometimes, I mean, sometimes it is necessary. And I think it's hard to tell in a hospital. That's the problem because they do it for everyone. And so it's hard to
Anyway,
believe what they tell you. And
Mhm.
with Clara's story with your midwife, I mean, I know midwives who are afraid of birth. And that's sort of my practice, has been my practice as a midwife, is to like not be afraid. One of the interesting things in COVID was to watch sort of the different responses of midwives who responded a lot with fear. And I found that was like, but isn't this our whole job is to keep fear out of the room? It doesn't work well when you have like the nervous system that's afraid in a room. And so I know exactly the type of midwife you're talking about, Claire. I'm sorry that you had that and that you felt that experience.
I mean, it was nuance, you know. She's
Yeah,
wonderful. She was wonderful
it's
and
great
like
in other ways.
it
Yeah.
was just this little thread of fear that like I was like, that wasn't mine. I didn't want that, you know. It's just like this little slithering thing that like I felt. And again,
Yeah.
I also really believe that, you know, this is a karmic, to bring the spiritual aspect in it, like this is a karmic experience between many souls. And so, you know, the souls that were there were, you know, meant to be there. Like there's some sort of karmic connection there. So I also I mean, and just to speak to more of my personal belief, like I I had a quote unquote backup plan for my first birth. Like I was happy to like know an OB and be like, yeah, who knows? You know, birth is a mystery. Like there's a mysterious aspect to this thing, and I respect that too. Like it's not, and that's the interesting, like the Freebirth Society indoctrination that like that would be like admitting defeat.
Yeah.
That's bizarre to me because I'm like, well, you're not in control. That's actually like very egoic to believe that you could control something like this
Right.
because it's a wild energy, you know?
Yeah, I just want to say something, Blair. I know you have something to say. I just wanted to quickly before you move to I think that, as a young midwife, I just wrote a memoir of learning midwifery and my own spiritual journey. Every chapter is a birth story. It's called Born Far From Home. But the second chapter is about a loss. And I think when I read that article about the Free Birth Society, it was kind of clear to me that those women, and I could be wrong, but it seemed clear that they hadn't ever, or maybe experienced like sitting with a woman who lost her baby. They were so
Right.
callous about it. It really bothered me. Like, that's something I never want to do. And, it came early in my career. I was a student and and I've seen it since, but early in my career as a student, it was very devastating. And I was pregnant when I was at that birth as a student. But the thing about it was I actually took it not for myself, not for her. I know this woman is still living with that loss, but for me and my journey as a midwife was a gift because I knew what was on the other side of what I was doing. Like I knew that that was it. That was the worst it was going to get, and I never wanted to see that. And so one, I had to manage the fear around it because I didn't want to bring that into the room because most of the time it doesn't go like that. And second, I had to learn what it was going to take to safely bring a baby and a mother to the other side of birth. And I do think that death is something that every pregnant woman knows is on the other side of what she's carrying. I don't think they're unaware of it. And I think the less we talk about it, and probably Blair, you have a lot to say about this with young, the more you shove it down, the bigger it can become. Whereas if you just accept that this is what's on the other side, I think it does become a little less of a elephant in the room, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Shannon, about this, like the elephant in the room, the inclusion of like the inherent risk.
Yeah.
And in the article, and I'm really curious about your perspective, but in the article and in messages that I received, um, it it sounded as though women were being trained to be birth keepers or radical midwives, whatever the language was, and they weren't being trained in these things like resuscitation, like shoulder dystocia, like kind of, I don't want to call them basic at all, but like these ways that you could intervene and like Ryan said, like, okay, the ilia goes here and just move this. And so that has really stuck with me. Like, why there wouldn't be like inclusion of just small things that could help the baby come through, and how deeply wrong that felt to read, right? So, okay, maybe the article is, you know, a hack job and they took some things out of context, but that was like, why wouldn't you just teach these basic things to help a child? And then for me, it's like, well, was it negligence? Is it incompetence? Have they maybe not been to very many births? Like, so I'm curious about your perspective on this, like, having a
Yeah.
school teaching women how to be in the birth room and then like almost purposely excluding these things.
Yeah, that's
There's
what made, go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say there's definitely some interesting conversation in the chat. People who've been in FBS, people who know Yolan personally.
Yeah.
And like we've said, like we don't want this to be call out cancel culture conversation. So I'm not actually going to quote any of those things there. I just want you guys to know you're being seen. Okay. We see you. We hear you. We really appreciate your insider info.
Yeah.
Um, like respect. There's also a lot of people who free birth their babies on this call, which is also beautiful. And I just want to acknowledge and put forth that it's so wonderful that we can sit here in respectful conversation and talk about this. And Shannon, go ahead and carry on about Blair's question, which we all have. Why don't they have just basic training? And why wouldn't you, after somebody's been in labor for 5 days and clearly has meconium coming out, why wouldn't you say you need medical attention? So, Shannon, I
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
know.
as a midwife, I couldn't understand a lot of their responses. That's what made me sort of think that they'd attended their own births, which Yolanda has quite a few, but maybe it didn't seem that they'd had a broad range of experience. And I don't know. Again, I don't want to cancel anybody, so I don't actually know. And I think, midwifery, as I learned it, is an apprenticeship-based model. It's not like a classroom. You go and you learn, and you do another birth, and you learn another skill, and it's not rocket science. And in California, they want to start teaching it in the community colleges as a trade. Like, it's not a medical profession in that way, but there are certain skills that you can learn that very easily, like to keep a baby breathing. It's like you breathe for the baby. You could do mouth to mouth. Like, yeah.
Go in the toilet.
Sorry?
No, I
Yeah.
think we had someone unmute.
Somebody's
Unmute.
unmuted.
Okay, no problem.
Sounded like a babe.
But I do think, yeah, I don't know what their experience level is. And I do want to say to the women who've had free birth, I don't like judge anybody for having a free birth at all, because I do understand the impulse to not go into the hospital. And I know the economics of midwives are what they are. The insurance companies keep us out, where we charge a lot of money, and a lot of it is out of pocket. And so I think that's an interesting part of the discussion that I think is left out. And, I hope one of the things I hope comes from it is, just that idea of integrating midwives back into American birth somehow. I don't know how, but so I do understand it, and I'll tell you, I'm full of birth stories. But I did have a birth right before Thanksgiving where the mom, she wanted a free birth and she felt a little uncomfortable, so she had me there, and I sat outside in the hallway while she had her baby, and she had a great experience, and she was really happy I was there. When I was done, I did what I do at all births. I checked her and gave her something warm to eat and weighed the baby. And, she got that kind of Soviet experience of birthing her baby by herself.
I feel the humility in that, Shannon.
Yeah.
Like that feels so beautiful to me. You're like, yeah, I'll sit in the hallway. I don't care. You do you. I'm here. I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you for offering that.
Mm. Yeah, I'm
Shall,
seeing.
sh-
I just want
shall we
to.
open it? Yeah, go ahead, Blair. I'm just thinking we can, if we want to open up the conversation, if there's something else the four of us want to still kind of discuss here.
Yeah, there's something that's coming through for me as people are talking about the dogma, right? Like the dogmatic approach to birth. And this for me is really related to embodiment as well, right? So like when something is so ideologically driven, like you said, Shannon, like something about the way in which they were approaching this concept of death actually seemed very detached, as though maybe they hadn't experienced it that much. Like maybe we can assume that. And there's just what I've seen in my practice is that like a lack of center and a lack of being able to like really, or let me say it in a different way. Okay. Dogma and ideology often like really entrances us when we can't find that center, when we can't find that rooted sense of like, this is me, I am me, right? So then these ideas become very romantic and they become kind of sexy, um, and they pull us into a belief system. And for me, this distinction between like a belief system and an embodied knowing are so different. And really, I think I had to go through a lot of trial and error to like discover that for myself. Like just because I believe something and I want to believe it and it props up a sense of my persona doesn't mean that it's actually living in my musculature, right? So with these dogmatic extremist ideas, I think they can be very compelling. They get a lot of traction on social media because nuance doesn't get traction, right? Nuance doesn't get likes, nuance doesn't get people applauding. Extremism does. And I wonder if that is how this kind of rise really happened, is like you have these really charismatic personalities, smart, bright, um, you know, thoughtful in many ways, well spoken. And I think it's so important for us to really, when we see this, when we're compelled, when we're taken in by these words, to really step back and take time and take distance and go like, okay, well, what that's an idea, that's a belief system. What is it that I actually know? And the thing that really fucking scared me in my birth is, and that really like showed me this, is like I was like, I trust my body. I fucking can do this. Women have been doing this for years. I can do this. And then like around hour 18, I was like, something's fucking wrong. And I was so scared. Like I was so scared. Like, am I okay? Is my baby okay? And all that belief just like really went out the window. And I was left with the reality of like my own fear. And I'm so grateful for the women that were there with me to help reflect it and um, help orient me, you know. And it wasn't perfect, and there were things that, you know, I probably would have done, like to have done differently. Um, but what I want to say also is that shaming ourselves for having that revelation is really not the answer either, right? And what I hear in this dogmatic world is that there's this huge um, kind of implicit hierarchy of like, this is the kind of birth that's good and this is the kind of care that's good. And if you don't have the, you know, whatever it takes to do it, then you're somehow not doing it right. And that feels violent to me too. That feels super violent and like um somehow overlooking the huge opportunities for growth and self-reflection that are the exact births that we have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Blair.
Yeah. I want to just like highlight what Blair just said about the difference between believing and knowing. You know, that's such a big part of my question around this is like, how do we, there's so many people out there selling beliefs and strong beliefs and like Blair said, like intoxicating beliefs. And so like that is my question. How do we invite women into knowing? And it's a process, you know, it's a long-term, lifelong process. And every single birth that we have invites us. Now it doesn't necessarily result in, but invites us into a deeper knowing and a more sensitive um, experience of the world in that way.
Yeah, I saw the transition of Blair's maiden self into mother when she was handed the hand of an elder woman and was like, I think you need me. Like it's cool. Like I'm glad you were tough to begin with. I'm glad we're here right now, but like come on, you know? Like but that's what we need, don't we? We need to be walked through that transition of maiden to mother, which is literally like happening right
Yeah.
then, you know? Especially if we don't have mothers, if we haven't been mothered. By the way, Esther Perel just put out a podcast I haven't listened to yet. It's called Mothering Your Mother So She Can Mother You. So I can't wait to
Oh,
listen to that.
good.
I was like, woo, yes. I'm just thinking like so many of our mothers didn't have sovereign birth. So like they didn't talk about like oh, I thought I was tough, and then I realized that my birth was really hard, and then I was going to need help, so then I did this, and so we don't feel safe. It's like we're starting from a nervous system point of stress because we're just trying to do the right thing so hard
Yeah.
that we sort of choose unwisely in the moment because we're just, we're making decisions from a place of, you know, disembodied or ungrounded, I would say is more my feeling, just like not having the elder guidance.
Yeah. And I really love what you're saying because and you kind of caught yourself like it's we love these distinctions. We love these black and white distinctions, right? Embodied, disembodied, maiden, mother. And the reality, as far as I'm concerned, is that this is just like an ever evolving process of deepening into who we are. And so I'm very uh like someone like these internet personalities that really put out this front of like being whole and having all the answers and this is the way. I'm very dubious. Yeah. It's like smells off.
Exactly. If they know everything, then you probably shouldn't be hanging out with them. If they profess to say they know everything, for me, that's just like, nope,
Hmm. And
nope.
also this kind of hierarchy of like embodied, disembodied, maiden, mother, like you haven't gone through those stages of initiation. It's like, girl, this is what we're doing. Like we're living. We're going through these like that is the purpose, right? Um and I think unshaming those types of conversations or removing the shame can help us be more honest and truthful about where we really are. And part of this conversation has just also raised for me a point that I think a lot, which is just like many of us are unmothered. Like we haven't had this ground of embodiment transmitted to us. So we have to learn it. And we have to learn it slowly. And we want it to be like a 3 week or 3 month process. And it's usually not. Like there's usually a lot of like attachment wounding that needs to be addressed and nervous system reorganization from our attachment wounds. Um, yeah, it's just a long process of becoming, isn't it? And to try and like wrap it up in a sweet package and well, I had this kind of birth, so that must mean this about me. That just yeah, doesn't work.
Thanks for your beautiful comments and insights in the chat. I'm like kind of looking at them a little bit, and yeah. So Shannon's got to jump off because she has another at 1:15, and I'm just like feeling this sort of moment of maybe where we carry on this discussion with folks here who are in the Zoom room. So I just want to acknowledge Shannon's gift, the gift of her presence here. She's my college friend. And we haven't had that much time together in the last 2 decades, but we're here and I'm feeling this bridge towards you now. And I feel so grateful that you were here. So thanks for your
Well, thank you.
expertise.
No, thank you for having me. It's so great to see all these women interested in this topic and in birth, and such insightful comments from my co-panelists. So thank you so much. I wish I could stay. You guys, I've sort of glimpsed at the chat, and there's such rich conversation there, but I have to go. I'll stick around for 5 minutes, but then
Yeah,
I'll
stay. But I
quietly
just
close
want to
up.
give you,
Yeah,
like, while this felt like a
yeah.
pause, I wanted to honor you and your presence. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys.
Um,
Janet.
Clara, have you been looking at the chat? You were gonna
Yeah.
be our chat maven and like kind of bring folks in, maybe to discuss. And I also feel like if there's something you've been burning to say, you can also, put your hand up and you'll pop up to the top here for us to see you. And We welcome your comments. The only thing I want everyone to remind everyone is that I think we're pretty clear on the negligence of Free Birth Society. There's like commodification happening in the chat, like, issues around this stuff. We get it. Let's not shit talk. I don't want to devolve down into that. We've been carrying this like high vibe up
Mm.
to this point. So let's continue to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I think Amy's ready.
Cool. Right on.
Yeah.
Amy. Hey, Amy. Yeah, we can't hear you, so just make sure you unmute yourself.
Hello, just lowering my hand. Thank you so much. It's really good to be here. It's pretty late here in South Africa, but I was willing to go past my bedtime to be with you, beautiful woman. Um, and this has been a really, um, yeah, particularly over the last, since the beginning of the year, quite a charged topic for me personally. And now it's all kind of coming to a head publicly. And yeah, it's for various reasons. My second son, I had a predominantly an unassisted birth. I had a birth keeper there, kind of in the wings, who I'd been working with in my pregnancy. With my second son, but the journey to making that decision was very different to what I have experienced or what I noticed online when everything becomes a movement and becomes an idea and an ideology. And it was triggered for me this year because that my son, that baby is now almost 4 years old. Because there were women in my community where I live. I bumped into a woman who had just moved and she was pregnant and she was talking about, having a free birth. And there was something about the way that she was speaking about the fact that she was having a free birth that really affected me. And it was something much deeper than, it was not about her. It was about this interrogation of why I chose to do it. And when I heard people, and because it wasn't only her, it was all over the internet, as we have all noticed, it has become very widespread and popular and almost trendy to make such a statement like, I'm having a free birth. And there was something in me that was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Because birth is, you cannot make a statement like that about birth. And it wasn't about her. It was, I had deeper work to do around my experience because the woman I chose to be at my birth, subsequently, or about a month before my baby was born, she was present at a birth where twins died. She is now on a being criminally. It's a whole thing here in South Africa, and she also got involved in the Freebirth Society subsequently. So, and she was like so amazing for me in my pregnancy, not because of like the typical prenatal care that you would get even from medical midwife, because we weren't doing typical prenatal care. We were doing, walks in the forest, and I was going through a very dark night of the soul in that pregnancy. I was losing my hair, and basically what was happening to me physically was made me reject the medical system, but not in this kind of like, fuck you kind of way. It was like, yeah, it was like I was taken over by something. I felt so deeply in relationship to my understanding of God and what the baby wanted, and it just unfolded in this really organic way. I wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to have scans, and this kind of pregnancy, and I'm going to have this kind of birth. It was this very kind of quiet, personal, deep journey, and it unfolded in a way that that it needed to. Like I ended up being alone. I didn't even want my husband in the room. And I guess I was looking back early in the year and I was going, God, how did I do that? Like, what was I thinking? And there was something a bit scary about that for me because I was like, Jesus, what if something had, and the thing is, because I actually saw this, my birth keeper is back in the country and I saw her today unplanned that it would be the day that we have this call. And I had a really long conversation with her about my decision to birth in the way that I did, was really about like, yeah, stepping out of a particular pattern and wounding in myself that kind of began to break in my first birth, but really like broke in the second birth. It was powerful, it was raw, it was wild, but it all these things that began to happen after he was born. There was a witch hunt for my birth keeper. There was, it was all over the news. There was, and then all the stuff with the Freebirth Society. What it brought to head for me is this much deeper karmic pattern or understanding of every person's personal journey. You cannot sell birth. Like birth is not an idea. It's not an idea. You can't sell birth. So that being said, I was in Yolanda's community briefly. I did her course. I found it really valuable for me, but I I felt that level of self-responsibility, and I felt that level of if I felt that something was wrong, I knew what I was going to do. It had nothing to do with anyone else who was there. That being said, when the baby was born and she was there for a few hours and then she left and then my best friend came, I could have done with a lot more women, really, actually. I could have done with a whole group of women hanging out in my house, being there to help me climb onto the bed, and even though I didn't tear and it was actually a much quicker birth, I was in a lot more pain. And that postpartum was much harder for me. It's like, you can have a beautiful birth and a straightforward birth, and it does not guarantee any kind of straightforward postpartum, or the rite of passage is always going to, for my belief is, we're going to be swallowed by the dark mother if we really want to be initiated by it. So yeah, this I wrote a piece about it in April, and I was reading it again today because I was so charged about it. And this woman in my community where I live, who was planning the free births, I had this prophetic dream about her birth, and it actually scared me because everything that happened in her birth, I dreamt about the night before it happened. And we were obviously in some kind of psychic connection. But what was so beautiful about her experience, because she ended up being transferred and had an emergency cesarean. I sat with her 2 days after her birth and I just listened to her tell me her birth story. A woman who's planned a free birth and ended up in hospital. And she said, I got exactly what I needed. I judged women who had cesareans, and she admitted to being under the spell of being sold what free birth was. And she had already extracted the medicine from it on day two. And not all women do that. And that was like incredibly, it was healing for me too, because I was like, there's something much bigger going on here that I'm not in control of, that the Freebirth Society are in control of. And I am of a belief that if anyone selling anything is not within a field of integrity, then that is also going to attract people who have similar wounds, who are looking to resolve something karmically there too. So, in a way, yeah, it's all perfect in its design. The pendulum swung one way, and now it's swung all the way to the other side, and we're coming back, hopefully, to some kind of middle ground. So this was inevitable. This was inevitable. And the
I
article is just like puppeteer, one of these elements in the story that we can observe and use as, yeah, material to just massage our own consciousness, really, which I feel like we're doing. So thank you. Thank you
such a
for, yeah, this.
profound, such a profound
Mm.
story. Thank you. And I feel like the question that's coming up for me is who is responsible, but I think I've changed it now to like what is responsible. Like, can we look at the bigger picture that Amy is suggesting that we look at? It's like, are we all just puppets? Are we all just moving around? I'm sure there's real hurts though that need to be addressed. So it's like always a little bit scary to be like feeling like you're on the edge of spiritual bypassing, right? So you're like, gotta walk that very carefully, walk that line carefully. But everything that you said landed so deeply for me. So Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Alexandra, there you are.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep myself short as possible because I've got a little one sleeping around the corner. I've just around a year ago had an unassisted birth with a bunch of women, and I'm so glad for and grateful for this conversation because ever since I've been thinking about why does no one, I live in Germany, I'm from England, but I live in Germany, it's just becoming more popular, the unassisted free birth society, not even near as America. But the topic got me because I've once studied with Blair. Um, is why did no one near in a podcast or at some videos talk about the feeling, the fear of death? Because I did actually almost die. I didn't, obviously, and my daughter as well, because it also took 30 hours. And I live in a place where it's about an hour to the next hospital, and I didn't have a midwife around. That's why I chose on a very long process. Is that the right thing for me to give birth unassisted, but with a doula and with people who know what they're doing with women? I would have never been able to cross that bridge of fear without them. And that's why I also see, I don't know if you follow that, Germany has gone really crazy about midwives. They're hardly allowed to do anything anymore. So I think this is pushing people, women especially, more into, okay, if we can't have a midwife, we don't want to go to hospital, so we're just going to do it ourselves. And if there are people on social media telling you can do it all, you just have to try harder, I think the spiritual bypassing is a narrow line. And I think you women, you brought something up where I'm like, thank God, you're open, but you're still aware. And it's really important to talk about the risk as well, even though I more than glad that I had this experience. It makes such a difference. I mean, it's my third child. Both births before were uh, beyond what I wanted. So this was kind of like a release, but also it was a risk. And I was able to take it. But as Amy said, I think you have to be really aware of the risk. In the end, I was able, I was willing to die, but by the point I was almost thinking I was going to die on my baby, I totally freaked out. I freaked out, and my doulas had to bring me back mentally. And then it worked well, but yeah, I just wanted to share that because I am the one I like the idea of free birth, unassisted birth, sovereignty, but I want women, pregnant women, to be mindful and aware of the risk as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Alexandra.
you, Alexandra. Okay, we have Tanya.
Tanya?
Yeah, it's Tanya. I really appreciate this conversation. I came across it from Clara, what she was sharing on Instagram. We had a little exchange last night. And then I read the article, and I'm really appreciating the inquiry into that and my own experience. Um, my first pregnancy and birth was 32 years ago. It was an emergency cesarean due to preeclampsia. And I they did a classical incision on my uterus, which is a vertical incision on my uterus. And when they told me that they were going to do that surgery, they said, you will never be able to have another vaginal delivery. You will never be able to have a vaginal delivery. And I remember being like, well, then no, absolutely not. Um, and then came around to not really having a choice in that moment. And but I also didn't believe them. So that was like the journey of my birth. And then this was before the internet, 32 years ago. So I went to the library and I read as many books as I could. And I talked to as many, um, experts, people who had experience with birth, midwives, doctors. Um, and so one of the things that's striking me right now is the difference between then and the information that I was able to gather and and now and the information that people have access to. And like the break in like a human connection and a relationship with who we are um, getting this information from. Um, and I guess, Clara, I'll ask you to like help me stay grounded and succinct. Um, my second pregnancy, anyway, that led me into like a deep dive into why did I get preeclampsia? What was going on with that? And the medical community couldn't offer me much. And so I went into, naturopathic and um, holistic health. Uh, my second pregnancy, I started bleeding at 6 weeks. I was under naturopath's care. I also knew that I would probably have to switch to medical system at some point. And at that point, we thought I was miscarrying. And I went home to miscarry, and then I didn't. And so from that point on, we were like, is this pregnancy going to result in a live baby or not? I had bleeding off and on through that pregnancy, and every day was being present with this baby that was alive in my belly, but also knowing there was a very real chance that this baby would die. Um, and he did. I had pre-ruptured membranes early. I was making as informed a choice as I could through all of those steps. Um, and just thinking about like informed choice and what that means. And I think we don't really know what that means. We don't really know what full informed choice is. We're just making the best decision that we can in the moment with the information that we have. Um, so he was born early and was in the NICU for 2 weeks and then died. Um, oh, I'm just sitting with that. He just had his birthday and his death day last month, and so that's very close to me. And I'll just fast forward to my fourth pregnancy was a surprise and also surprisingly healthy. Um, I went to 40 weeks, 3 days. I like to count every single moment. And I had no problems, no issues, and I was able to have a home birth. I also have a bicornuate uterus, so I have a heart-shaped uterus. Um, and so my babies like to be breech, and she was breech. And I had also been a birth doula. Um, and I love that this was brought into the conversation, is that I saw my first birth at 10 years old, which was my mom's. And um, I also saw her. I'm the oldest of 8 kids. So I was around birth. I was around um, breastfeeding. I was around baby wearing. I was around my mother's friends who were doing this as well. And I appreciate that being brought to my attention, like what a gift that is. And even looking at my own children, they don't have that. They don't have that experience. Um, Although now that I say that, I'm like, oh, my son was present at my last birth. Um, uh, so I also trained as a childbirth educator. Like I wanted to glean as much information about natural, healthy birth as possible. And I also knew I didn't know it all, and I wasn't prepared for it all. And I also knew that, being in birth, in that realm of birth, is not where our brain is trying to keep track of the health and well-being of me and my baby. And if something went wrong, I wanted to have someone there to do what I couldn't do. But I also trained in neonatal resuscitation because I too wanted to know, what did that look like, you know? And not even necessarily for myself, but for the other women that I was supporting. Like, what does that look like? And I hired and found a midwife who was quite possibly the most experienced midwife in my community. And they were experienced. And when I say experienced, they had attended, they trained in breech birth, you know? And I think about the Freebirth Society and the training. I say training, and I shouldn't put that in quotations. They were trained. They're very well trained, but they don't have a lot of experience in what it feels like when you're in the presence of birth and what it looks like. And I think that's a missing piece. So, all that to say, uh, what was I responsible for? And I really appreciated that question of like, who's responsible? And maybe it's, what am I responsible for? And what am I responsible to? And what is my attendance responsible for? And what are they responsible to? And can we be as clear as possible on that? And also, we don't know everything. We don't know what's going to happen. And there's that mystery piece as well. And, that piece about karma and all of my experiences, I learned so much. And would I trade them? Would I trade that? I don't know. It is what it is, and the wounds make the medicine. And my medicine, I have a lot of medicine in this realm that I'm grateful for. And the loss of a child and the loss of a child in birth, that is a deep, deep hurt. And thinking about these women who are at the helm who don't have that medicine and don't have that lesson, and to be teaching like the ideal and that you're not doing it right is irresponsible, you know? And what are they responsible for and what are they responsible to, And I went on Instagram yesterday to look at their feeds and the pictures of these women just after they've given birth. There was something about there's something in that realm, that sacred liminal space after a woman gives birth and the look in their eyes. And I was like, do they even know? Do they even know? Like, I don't know. It struck me as this really sacred moment that they were sharing with a world that I think was it was hard for me to see. I'll just say that. It was hard for me to see when I'm like, I'm not sure you actually know what uh like the choice that you made, and you have this beautiful healthy baby. Yay, that's amazing, And I think about like Yolanda, great, you've had 11 births that went really well. That is your experience. That is not the experience of everyone, Like my mom had 8 healthy vaginal births, and I'm the oldest of 8. There's 5 daughters. 3 of us have had preeclampsia. Like there's something genetic that came in that we were given to deal with. But my mom could have said, and at one point she did, like, you have to believe more. And I'm like, that's not it all. That's not all of it. It's a yes and. So I'm gonna tie it up.
Yeah.
and say thank you so much. And I'm really grateful for the conversation and the inquiry into my own, like reading that article, I was like, oh shit, like
Hmm.
I thought the same things. Like I believe in birth, I believe in the process, and then like it's yes and. Yes and. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Tanya, yeah,
Thanks.
I just want to thank you so much for taking us on that journey with you. Could really feel your embodiment of what you were saying. Thank you.
Mm.
Hey, Kelly.
Kelly, yeah, you're going to join us. Others.
Hi. Hi, ladies. So I'm sorry if I was kind of blowing up the chat a little bit. I just have so many thoughts that I'm trying to organize, both about my reasons for my own free birth, as well as what I think about the free birthing or unassisted birth movement kind of going forward, because I think we're in a spot where FBS has kind of left this vacuum a little bit. Um, And how do we fill that? And I think part of it is um, helping women to decondition from this idea that there is a right way to do birth. And I think some of the other ladies mentioned that, you know, there is medicine sometimes in things not necessarily going the way that we want them to in pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and I have certainly had my fair share of that as well. I have 3 children. And so I think another thing I want to say is I having birth unassisted may be more of a calling for certain women than a rule that everybody should feel that this is the gold standard. It's not for everyone. As somebody who had an unassisted birth with only my husband present, I would have loved to have had support. It just wasn't available to me where I was living, where I'm still living, but will be moving. There were some midwives in the area, which I spoke to, one of which I had for my second birth. It was my third birth that I free birthed. And while she was great, I ended up in the hospital anyways due to something happening at the very end. And because of her license, I had to do XYZ, or else, she could no longer be with me. So I could not have a home birth with her. For my second child, I was not in the mindset at all to do an unassisted birth. So I had a birth in the hospital. It was horrible. Um, my first birth in the hospital was also horrible, which was why I went with the midwifery route to begin with. And so when I found out that I was pregnant with my third child, I wanted that option of someone who will listen to me and the experiences that I've had, because I have had relatively easy and straightforward births from a medical perspective, even my hospital births. And so I felt like it didn't matter. I wasn't treated well anyway in the hospital system. And so I kind of went into my free birth knowing that, um, okay, at least this is all on me. I don't have to listen to somebody else who's trying to fit me into a template of you need to do things a certain way. And so, um, yeah, it was scary and I felt called to do it and I would probably do it again. Um, but I think my preference would be to have somebody there who can help in case of an emergency, but also not override my own intuition with my own body and what I know to be true for myself. And so, I think we have to start being honest with that, with ourselves about our reasons for why we want to have an unassisted birth and to start speaking to the community in such a way that, hey, this is a choice. it may not be the best choice. It's a choice that many women feel kind of backed. I felt backed into a corner. That's why I did it. FBS was a support at the time, surely, although that kind of created a little bit more trauma of its own, as I kind of alluded to in the comments, because just some of the things that I saw there were not right. But um, yeah, that's what FBS tried to do, was to be there for women in that situation. And I think that we need to start building up those supports for women. I think we need to have other communities in the vacuum where FBS was. Medical professionals, I know that they can only do so much because they are bound by a license in many cases. But I think midwives who have skills and experience and truly want to defer to a birthing mother and listen, not just say that you're a one size fits all, but listen to the woman in question. Is she knowledgeable? Does she know what she's talking about? Um, don't not try to fit women into a template. And I think that that's what we're going to have to see going forward, um, if we want to give women more options in birth. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for that, Kelly.
Hi, Amanda.
Oh, Amanda, I lost you.
I'm here.
There you are. Hi.
She's there, yeah.
Hi. So I shared a bit in the chat about um, who I am, but I am a mother to 6. I was a home birth midwife for 10 years, and then I became a priestess and a death midwife, and um, now I'm a pleasure midwife. I help women have really amazing orgasms. I came to, I still like to say unassisted birth. I feel like FBS almost took what was unassisted childbirth and rebranded it into their own thing. So um, I think that's part of what has brought me back around to uh, being interested in this, is that I just really hate the fact that every discussion around free birth is centered now around FBS. And um, so I came to free birth 20 years ago as a midwife. In my apprenticeship, I apprenticed with 2 midwives, and one of them in particular was just very, she would have never put it this way, but she was very hands-on, very interventionist, very hero complex. Women would always end up having a lip, and she would jump in and be the one to save the women. And you know, and women loved her for it because they're caught up in the hormones. And I was standing back going like, this is wrong. This is not okay. So when I was pregnant with my 4th baby, I planned to have an unassisted birth. My husband was not on board. While I was in labor, he called the midwife that I was apprenticing with. Um, she came and uh, ended up shoving her fingers inside me. It was a birth rape. I very much felt like I was going to die when her fingers were up inside me. And she's telling me in my, like yelling in my face, push me out, push me out. It was just, exactly the opposite of what I wanted for that birth. So with my fifth baby. I went into labor at 34 and a half weeks and so very strongly felt like I have to stay home. I gave birth to him unassisted. He had the longest umbilical cord I've ever seen. He had a true knot, but he had wrapped his cord around his neck and his foot. So it was perfectly positioned so that as he came down, that knot didn't tighten. I fully believe if I had gone to the hospital with him, it would have been a stillbirth. He did end up spending a few days in NICU. Then I lost two babies. And we moved. I had taken a break from midwifery and I got pregnant again and ended up having a stillbirth halfway through pregnancy. I felt very strongly that I also wanted to do that birth, even though it was a stillbirth, unassisted. I ended up with a retained placenta. We lived in the mountains. I truly almost died in the ambulance on the way down the mountain. I went through that and got pregnant again. And again, chose unassisted birth. And felt so strongly, so deeply, my intuition was telling me that the unassisted birth was the right choice again, even though I had gone right to the brink of death with that stillbirth. And his birth ended up being, my labor was 40 hours. It made me question everything I knew about birth and about death. But I so fully knew in my body that that's what I needed, what my baby needed. And once I caught him, it all made sense. And I think that's a piece of it that no one can understand until they've actually been there and done that. That yes, I had to grapple with, this could kill me. Am I willing to face death again? And I mean, for so many women, that is not the right choice. And that's something that's bothered me about Free Birth Society, is them trying to spread the message that anyone can do this. No, and clearly women who weren't ready to fully accept that responsibility were pushed into making this decision. And yeah, I don't know. I have so much to say about this topic, but I really just wanted to share my experiences of what it is to truly take responsibility, to understand that every time a woman gives birth, she's traveling to the veil between life and death. And this is something that that needs to be talked about, no matter how a woman is giving birth. We need to bring the discussion of death into birth so that women understand, even if you go to even if you go to the hospital, a lot of women die in the hospital. Like there is no perfect choice. Um, but it's about connecting deeply to your own intuition and turning off everything outside of that. That's really where safety in birth comes from, is a woman who is so deeply connected to her intuition that nothing else can get in the way of that. So, thanks.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Hmm.
And
So
Yeah.
any closing thoughts that have
oh,
percolated for you in these
I was
shares?
I was just gonna say that yeah, I just love the like different flavors of the feminine and embodiment and knowing um and I'm also just noting like the feminine aspect of even this discussion, like it's a circling, and I really feel that quality to it instead of this like, oh, we're teaching or there's this hierarchy. It's like, no, we're just gathering. This is
Yeah.
a circle. And so I just really appreciate that feeling and being in that space, being in the space with all of you and hearing and feeling your stories. And that's ultimately actually what I've really loved about just even like promoting this and hearing people, just the conversations I've had. And this to me, it's actually the answer to a lot of the inquiries, you know, paradoxically enough, is that we listen and we hear and we like circumambulate. And that's how feminine power you know transmits.
Yeah.
And it's the process of, it's how we mature in a lot of ways, is we have this modeling. It's a teaching by modeling. So thank you for all of your modeling to me.
Yeah. Can I just say I
Agree.
so agree. Thank you for articulating that, Clara.
Yeah, same.
Um, yeah, there's such medicine. Like there's such medicine in the bodies of women and the bodies of mothers and in these stories. And you're right. That actually seems like the answer that has emerged for me is like, um, you can't get it unless you go down and in. That's where it comes from. And like this process of letting ourselves be affected by each other and hear one another. It's a very deep process.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for being open to this and coming in with open hearts, too. I think we did a really good job of being respectful and listening to everyone also all together, which isn't sometimes the easiest thing to do, but it was our intention and we were successful in that. And I really appreciate all of you being a part of that, too. Um, yeah, so I guess it's closing time. And we will keep you posted on any other. I mean, I don't know. I sense a women's circle situation coming out of this. I don't know what that will look like, but maybe. Um, but in the meantime, thank you very much for being here and take very good care of yourselves. And I don't know. I don't really have much to say other than I really appreciated the group and all of your loving attention and open
Yeah.
hearts. And just want to say thank you to everyone who was here. Okay.
Yeah. And thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, yeah, for all of your expertise and wisdom around this. Um, Before we go, if it feels right for you, you can pop in the chat just some kind of digestion. Like, what are you leaving here with? What what really touched you, what is still lingering in your mind and heart. Like, you can pop it in the chat, and I think that'll be a good way to close. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Lori. The communal holding of women, our embodiment and wisdom. Amen. Thank you, Haley. Leaving here knowing the answers aren't always direct, but can arise from the depths as we fall in love with and open to the questions we seek. Yeah. Yeah, I'm leaving here with just a greater invitation and trust in living the question and showing up exactly as we are. I'm leaving here. Oh, we got some coming in. I'm leaving here feeling held by a circle and really grateful to my sisters for holding this difficult topic with me, spacious around my heart. Thank you for this conversation. I'm currently pregnant with my first and trying to explore how I'd like to be held through birth. It has been really hazy and confusing. Being here today, hearing you all has helped clarify some questions I needed to ask myself. So great. Okay. Well, I think that we'll close for today. Thank you so much,
That's
everyone.
a bye, ladies. See you all.
One more. Thank you
Oh,
for offering this discussion, so needed, and feeling grounded. Feeling hopeful for the ripples that continue. Me too. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.